framework, impact assessment, project management, and is currently involved in compliance to impact with sustainability, advising to government, corporate, NGOs, and academics on CSR and sustainable development. Nikhilji has 3 decades of experience in implementation, training, advocacy, grant management, strategy, and policy formation of development of the programs. He is an implementer, a CSR advisor, and trainee to various corporate organization and institution. Now, I would request Dr. Bhaskar Chatterjee and Nikhil Panji to please proceed. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. So, Manya, how much time do we have? Sir and I, how much time do we have? About 45 minutes, an hour? So, thank you first of all to CSR Times for inviting Dr. Chatterjee and myself. I was having a brief discussion with Sir a couple of days ago. It's been 10 years since the CSR mandate has rolled out. The date was 1st of April 2014. The bill became the law sometimes in August. I think it was in August, September 2013. And then it took some time for the rules to come out. Sir, along with a crack team at the IICA, and I was fortunate to be part of that team, we got down under his guidance to roll out this mandate. And today we are on the 10th year of this CSR mandate. And each year we are finding new things coming out. There is data which is there to be analyzed. There is a lot of impact analysis that is happening. There have been high-level committees who have sat over the way the CSR policy framework has evolved. So what I've done is, I've prepared some 10, 12 questions for Sir, but we will make it a very natural, free-flowing conversation with him. And the idea would be to ask Sir, because he was the first one in the country to actually begin the concept of CSR in the structured way that we see it today. And that actually began when he was, I think, Secretary Department of Public Enterprises. And the first set of CSR guidelines came out in 2010. So, Sir, I would like to ask you, how did it all begin? And I remember some of the things that you said at that time when you were at the DPE and then you came to the IICA, and how critical it was. I was just joining the team. I was with the Tech Mahindra Foundation before that. And you did tell all of us, there was a crack team of 5 or 10 of us with him, that if this bill becomes a law and if Section 135, which is being included, it gets passed through the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, and it becomes part of the amended Companies Act 2013, then this would be historic. And it did turn out to be that way. And Mr. Sachin Pilot literally piloted the bill and it became the law. There was a jinx that whichever minister would come in the MCA, he would get transferred. Mr. Moily was there before him. And there was a standing committee of Parliament under Mr. Yashwant Sinha, who was also kind of instrumental in engaging with the civil society and the corporates. So, Sir, I would like to first of all ask you, I would like to ask you from the DPE times, but I leave it to you, frankly speaking, because you may know it, even before that. What is it that you thought was required when the public sectors, which are government-owned companies, they came forth with CSR as a mandated activity for them? Though I know your favorite topic is to go earlier and also give a background as to how CSR was being defined globally and how the Indian CSR was very specific to the Indian agenda. So would like to hear from you, sir, to begin with, and then we'll try and build up the conversation from there.
Terrific. Thank you, CSR Times, and thank you, Nikhil, for being here with me today, and thanks to all of you for being with us here. When we talk about CSR, anyone you talk to, any public sector, any private sector company you talk to, and when we were thinking of starting CSR formally in this country, most people would tell you that, what's new about CSR? We've been doing it much before the law came in. It's been in our DNA, it's been in our bloodstream, and it's gone on for so long. I mean, why should government get into CSR at all? That was the kind of issue that we faced when we thought of making it a formal entity. But also we realized that we should have CSR in the public sector first, because we cannot go to the private sector and say, you are now mandated to do CSR, when government companies themselves are not doing it. And in India, therefore, the real modern CSR as we know it today begins on the 1st of April 2010. It is on that day that the guidelines for public sector enterprises come into effect. And all of the public sector enterprises are now guided by those guidelines. How much time do you think it took to develop those guidelines? I remember that I moved into the Department of Public Enterprises in September of 2009. And we got the guidelines operative from the 1st of April 2010. Now, if any one of you were sitting in that seat, you would realize that there are about 250 public sector enterprises in the country. When you are writing the guidelines, you are writing it for all the 250 companies, big and small. So, how would you put it across and write a guideline applicable to all of them? The first thing that a policymaker needs to do is to understand CSR globally. All the history of CSR, starting from the middle of the 19th century till the time that you are writing. If you do not know all of that history, you cannot write it. So, the first and foremost thing to understand is what is the global CSR picture? And then from global, you go to local and make it global, you go to national. National, you make it local. So, I had to read all of that, absorb it, and then, as you rightly said, see how can we Indianize it? How can we make it particular to us culturally and emotionally? And then, what does it mean to public sector? So the question very often asked of me was this: CSR is about public good, right? And the CMDs of the Navaratnas and Maharatnas would tell me, if CSR is for public sector is also for public good. Both are there for public good. Why do we need CSR? In any case, we are doing public good. And therefore, it became a bit of a dilemma to convince them that doing what you are doing may well be public good, but you have to go beyond that. For example, Rural Electrification Corporation. What is the mandate? You are to light up the last village. This is the mandate of REC. Is this public good? Of course it is. But REC is doing that in any case because that is the job. They are earning their money from that. What are you doing for education in those villages? What are you doing for health? Just connecting wires is okay. But what about developing the places where you go? That should also be part of your mandate. And therefore, CSR must be a much more holistic concept. That is what I tried to convey in the guidelines which came into effect from 1st of April 2010. The history of modern CSR in India begins from that date. That's the cutoff date.
In fact, sir, I remember in those initial days when a lot of conversations would happen between the IIC and CII and FICCI and some of the others, the debate would invariably be that is this not another tax?
Exactly.
And you would go at length to explain that if it were a tax, it would be paid into the government coffers, the government treasury, and therefore it should not go into government. You need those NGOs as partners, and that is what led to a totally last 10 years. This has been a total sea change in the NGO sector in the country. That kind of conversation that began, because otherwise the tendency could have been to put the money back into the government treasury. And then because, the other thing you also, I remember, mentioned, and why I'm sharing this with everyone is because when the law was enacted and the rules were being made, we at the IICA, under Sir's guidance, would prepare those courses. And I was the one who was heading one of those verticals called Learning and Development. And my job was to roll out CSR courses, where the corporates who would send their head CSRs to come and understand. In fact, Sir at that time had developed the model CSR policy, the framework and the NGO hub, etc. So, sir, what do you think was able to help us to convey this to the corporates, that since this has now been legislated, do not take it as a tax? And the argument we gave, and where we are today, I will also keep, coming back straight away to where we are, because today we find corporates and government collaborating very proactively, and the trust deficits have also gone. So the kind of path we have treaded in the last 10 years has been quite phenomenal. So just wanted you to share as to what was the challenge at that time to convince the corporates, and maybe also the government people, in between. I remember, sir, would tend to be more about just making sure that this is done. But today you find the young district collectors in faraway areas very keen to collaborate with corporates, and the NGOs are developing those models of engagement. So what was it that kind of helped us to convince the corporates? And today, where we are, just wanted you to share how this has all evolved and what kind of a message there is in it, because this can also lead to some kind of an extrapolation for the next 10 years. Because some trend can then be, extrapolated, because if there are results to show today, and we are now also talking about impact assessment, which has now become mandatory for certain category of projects.
That's a whole barrage of questions, Nikhil.
I'm actually too excited to be asking you too many questions because the time is tight, and I'm trying to make this like a last or second last over of a T20 match.
But let's take a little bit of a sequence, because nothing happens in the immediate. When we started out, what did we think? And today, where we are. And then, of course, we'll reflect on the future.
Sure.
So from public sector, how do we go to private sector? Public sector, I wrote 14 pages of guidelines, made them operative, had a lot of consultancy with all the CMDs and so on, and that happened. But when you go to private sector, it's a different ball game. You can't issue guidelines to them and say, "Hi guys, you follow this from tomorrow," and they say, go look after yourself. So there has to be a law. And coincidentally, at that time, when I had written the guidelines for public sector enterprises, the Companies Act of 2013 was on the anvil, and we were preparing. I also looked a lot at corporate governance. So I was in the drafting committee of the bill, 2013 bill. Most of the 2013 bill was written in 2011 and 12. So the corporate affairs secretary told me that, "Sir, I will give you one section. There are in the Companies Act now 470 sections. You, Dr. Chatterjee, will get one section. So those 14 pages of guidelines, please convert into 120 words and make it section 135. So you can imagine that as a policymaker, now I had to go beyond public sector and think of the entire nation and write it in 120 odd words. And that's the size of section 135. And you know that in one section, you can't write everything. Most of it follows in the rules. But we made that section. And there were 2 or 3 things important there. And I'll just stop there while I'm answering this second question. First, who should take decisions on CSR? In a company, normally at that time, CSR is what I would call a backroom activity. Some relative, some family member, somebody was entrusted with the keys of CSR, कि भैया स्कूल खोल दो, अस्पताल बना दो, धर्मशाला कर दो, वगैरह वगैरह. यही CSR का मोटा मोटी एक तस्वीर हमारे सामने थी. Now we had to say the best brains in the company must take CSR decisions. Where are the best brains in a company? Quite obviously in the board of the company. And therefore, a popular Chatterjeeism is this: from backroom to boardroom. The first thing that Section 135 does is to ensure that the board of the company, the CSR committee recommends to the board takes the decision. So CSR becomes a board level activity. That's the first thing we did. The second part, and this is part of the conceptualization, when you think of CSR, always think of a triangle. When I was writing Section 135, this is the triangle that sat before me. Government at the apex, which is the regulator and the facilitator. One side of the base, corporates, funder, people who monitor the project, and people who evaluate. Where did my money go? How did I spend it? Did it make an impact? This is one side of the base of the triangle. The second side, and this is the most unique part of CSR, never attempted before in any part of the world, ever, even in the history of the USA. And that is to bring civil society organizations into the CSR space. This is the completely different tectonic shift away from any CSR attempted anywhere in the world. And I realized that we had 3.3 million civil society organizations. Even if 1% of them delivered the goods on the ground, we would have an excellent CSR, which will be a model to the entire world. And what civil society can do is implement. So they are the implementing agencies. Why so? Because corporate entities are not expected to suddenly, give up their suits, boots, ties, socks, and everything and start getting into villages. That's not what they were hired for. But civil society lives in communities. They work at the grassroots. They know what the other India is like. If we do not tap them, we can never do CSR, at least not in India. And therefore, my initial conceptualization was exactly this: government, corporate, civil society. And in the synergy between them has come this incredible 10 years in which we have shown the world what CSR can do.
In fact, sir, I remember that in the initial days, you would re-emphasize all the time that this 2% is a way by which the corporate can plug in their innovation, their project management skills, their technology into the way the taxpayers' money is spent, or maybe through government partnerships. How do you think that has played out, sir, over the years? Because that was
This
also
is
one of the
important.
primary.
So you might ask, the poor, the marginalized, the disadvantaged, they are the responsibility of whom in any country? The primary duty and responsibility of government are these segments. If that is so, then why bring in corporates? Well, corporates must ask, the poor are the responsibility of government. My responsibility is to my shareholder, maximize shareholder earning, maximize profits. That's the end of the game. I pay my taxes to government. Government looks after the poor. Who am I? Why should I bother? Which was fine till the turn of the century. From 2000 onward, the scene changes completely, and you see that globally people ask corporates, What are you doing with your profits? You are functioning in that very society from whom you are taking out the profits. And when you take out the profits from society, should you not give something back? Should you also not have a responsibility towards that society in which you operate? Should everything be left to government alone? And that's why I say to you, in government, I've been a government servant for 41 years. And I know that in government, whatever we do, however much we do, bureaucracy is still bureaucracy. There are many things that government and the government machinery cannot do that the private sector can do. Precisely this innovation, government has none. We go by precedence, quickness, quick response, agility. Government is like the Titanic ship. You can move it this much in 15 years. Companies can do that in 15 days. So the agility, the innovation, and also bang for the buck. Government has a hard time to find where its money went. It takes CAG to tell us after 3 years that your money was misused. But companies can make quick assessments. 1 crore खर्चा किया, उस 1 crore में हुआ क्या? So they can do a lot of this immediate feedback and do corrections. So these advantages we therefore brought, and therefore it gave corporates the chance to participate in the development agenda of the nation.
That's very relevant, sir. And I would also like to ask you to share that when this kind of a logic was presented by you and all of us at the IIC, when we traveled all over the country, what was the counter logic that would often be presented? Because, initially, as I said, the corporates did feel that this was a kind of attack, but there were some proactive corporates also who were doing corporate social responsibility from many years earlier as well. And there were others also who could feel that maybe this is a great opportunity by which they can have a better connect with the communities which are also consumers of their goods and services. So in fact, I remember you, very clearly mentioning that some a phrase that we would often use, the business case to CSR. That while CSR is corollary to business, it can lead to better, brand building as a corollary. And later on, the FAQs have also, and the elbow room also that is presented in the rules. So do you think, sir, that the corporates were eventually able to take it in the right spirit and then galvanize their engagement and the board members especially, because till now they didn't have those CSR committees of the board. It was a new entity within the board that happened. So what is your experience on that, sir? Because you engage directly with the boards of the companies and to make them understand. And when we were trying to promote our courses also, we would try and reach out to them to engage and take up this course that we were rolling out.
Yeah, so let's not mince words. The fact is, the corporate sector in India opposed CSR tooth and nail. And they saw it as a threat that government was trying to interfere in something that was pretty much close to their hearts, their minds, their emotion. Many of them were already doing a fair amount of what they called CSR. Today, of course, in our definition, that would be nowhere near CSR. But they were doing that. And they felt that government should steer clear from CSR altogether. So they saw this as a threat, a real threat. And they often would say, well, if you really want 2%, just put a tax on it and take it, as you rightly said. And the idea was exactly the reverse. We said, we don't want your money, for heaven's sake. We want you to spend 2% of your profits as you want to spend. Your board wants to spend. Spend it in what you think is best for the community to which you belong. And one other point I'd like to ask, many of us asked that question. Dr. Chatterjee, you were saying, CSR, 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 Section 135 and all the rules. Where is the definition of CSR? What do you mean by CSR? And all of you know that whether it is Section 135 or any rule thereafter, we have never defined CSR. Have any one of you seen a CSR definition anywhere given out by government? Never. Why not? If government wants you to do CSR, the least you can do is to define it. नहीं? क्यों नहीं? And I would be asked that question very often. That why did you, Dr. Bhaskar Chatterjee, after reading all of CSR in the entire world, never ever define CSR at any platform or in any government notification? The reason we did not do that is because the moment you define CSR, what happens? It becomes subject to interpretation. For example, one person just now talked about emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. Is it part of CSR? Can be, need not be. And the answer given by the gentleman from Indigo was so wonderful. CSR is not the panacea for everything. So we said, whatever you want to do, it must be in schedule. Bolo?
Which schedule? Schedule 7.
Schedule 7. The key to the whole CSR ensemble is Schedule 7. If what you are doing is in Schedule 7, it is CSR. If it is not in Schedule 7, it is not CSR. Simple as that. When was Schedule 7 drafted? Any idea? When could Schedule 7 have been drafted? Somebody get up and say, tell us.
Any guesses?
When was the company's bill drafted? I told you that. Roughly. So, Schedule 7 was drafted in the year 2013. All right? In 2013, what was developed by the United Nations as a charter, like SDGs are there today? What was available to me when I was writing Schedule 7? Correct.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, MDGs, as they were known, 8 of them, Millennium Development Goals, are all that I had. And if you compare Schedule 7 with the MDGs, you will see that quite a lot has been inspired from those MDGs. I have changed the language completely. And also, I've added a lot of things which are Indian. MDGs were 8, of which 8th, of course, was not useful. Only 7 were useful. All the 7 are there, but in a completely different Indian context. But I have gone far beyond that. But I had no SDGs. I had only the MDGs. And imagine that in these 10 years, Schedule 7 has undergone only 2 changes. And that's it. Another quick test. In 10 years, many laws change. Section 135, in 10 years, not one word has been amended. No amendment has ever been brought before Parliament, nor will it ever be brought in the next 10 years at least. Section 135 has stood the test of time and will remain tested for as much as into the future that I can see.
So something about the NGOs I would want you to also talk about, and a very, very common phrase that you would use was corporatization of NGOs and NGOization of corporates. How do you see this having played out? Because for the NGOs, this was the first time that they were dealing directly with corporates. And otherwise, the funding used to be through donations or maybe FCRA or other contributions or philanthropic. But now there was a very different ball game altogether. And that was also another challenge I remember that we had to face and tackle. And so, what were your thoughts on that, sir? How has that piece
So it's very
evolved?
interesting, actually. You talked about the Parliamentary Standing Committee headed by Mr. Yashwant Sinha. And we were consulting. We had many, many consultations. So one day we would ask the corporates to come. And some of the top corporates came. And I have to tell you that the interest of the corporates was phenomenal. So the very, very top, middle, and all of corporate world came and talked to us. We consulted them. We spoke to them. Gradually, it was also a part of convincing them. You don't want to have them as enemies. You want to have them on board. So they said, sir, ठीक है, up to a point, चलिए आप कह रहे हैं तो कुछ हम कर सकते हैं. But एक चीज प्लीज ना करें, दयापूर्वक ना करें. क्या है वो चीज? सर, एनजीओस को मत लाइए इसमें. एनजीओस क्या होते हैं सर? आज एक बोर्ड यहां है, वही बोर्ड वहां, वही बोर्ड उठाकर वहां चले. इन पे तो आप निर्भर बिल्कुल ही ना करें सर. ये तो आपको बिल्कुल ही लेट डाउन कर देंगे, इनका कोई मतलब ही नहीं है. और हम इनको पैसे क्यों दें सर? करना है खुद करेंगे. ये कौन होते हैं हमारे पैसे लेने वाले? एंड देन दे वुड लीव. 3-4 days later हम एनजीओस को बुलाते थे. आप बताइए, आप तो ग्रास रूट्स पे काम करते हैं, कम्युनिटी के विषय में आपसे ज्यादा कौन जानता है? सीएसआर अगर करना है तो आप ही लोग तो करोगे ना. बट पैसे आपके पास है नहीं और ना सरकार आपको दे सकती. कॉर्पोरेट्स ने अगर करना है तो आपसे करवाएंगे. उनका क्या होता था रिस्पांस? सर, सारे कॉर्पोरेट्स चोर हैं, मुनाफाखोर हैं, 2 पैसे के मुनाफा के लिए कुछ भी कर सकते हैं. इसलिए सर, जो भी आप करेंगे अनिवार्य करें, करवाएं, फोर्स करें कि पैसे दें, तभी जाके कुछ होगा. अदरवाइज वो तो अवॉइड करते रहेंगे सर, कभी कुछ नहीं करेंगे. भरोसा इन पे बिल्कुल ना करें. So imagine the policy maker, and Sinha Saab himself was a politician. All of us understood that there is a trust deficit between corporate India and civil society India. And that is natural. There's nothing unnatural about it. So it was important for us to realize that if CSR was going to be successful, that trust deficit has to be bridged. Because corporates and civil societies live in different worlds. So how do we bring them together? And this is the reason why I say in these 10 years, corporates have become so much more responsive to NGOs. They speak to them, they understand them. Because the real ideas about grassroots development lies with NGOs, trusts, Section 8 companies. They know the real India. But the ability to take decisions as to where money must go, how it must be utilized, what kind of reports and returns must be given, how to build efficiencies in the system, how to bring innovation, how to evaluate the cost of the money given, all that lies in the corporate hands. But if they do not talk to each other, CSR can never be a success. It is in the synergy between the two of them lies the success of CSR. And therefore, another Chatterjeeism, corporatization of NGOs, NGOization of corporates. Now NGOs have become pretty much able to understand the language of corporate India, the requirement of corporate India. What type of financial returns do they need? What type of returns and reports do they want from us? How should we keep our accounts to satisfy the auditors? What kind of timeliness do they need? Efficiencies need that. And many NGOs have learned that this is what we must do to be able to satisfy what corporates want.
So that's why
And corporates now know that if they do not speak to people like Nikhil Pant, they will never get the right ideas of what is the pulse of the nation. What do communities need? How do we then make a program, a project? If they don't tell us, we don't sit together and talk, we will just not be doing the right thing. So, over these 10 years, one of the great developments is corporates no longer see CSR as a threat, they see it as an opportunity.
yeah.
Development number one. Development number two. Corporates and NGOs sit and talk at the same table.
Yeah.
The trust deficit has reduced. I won't say it's gone, but reduced considerably. These are, I think, the two principal outcomes of what has happened in these 10 years.
Sir, I would also like you to bring in the government piece over here. So, because you very beautifully summarized how the corporates in the NGO association has evolved, and having been in government for so many years, today when I'm working through my NGO projects and we try and work across the country, we find that the young district collectors, many of them, they are very keen for corporate partnerships, CSR partnerships. So, do you also see, sir, that the role of government has also evolved more as a monitor, as you said in the beginning, or a facilitator, to an active participant in the process where they are presenting their requirements in a more proactive manner, where this increasing trust gain between the corporate and the NGO can fit in? And I again remember very often you would say that if there was a midday meal and there was lack of protein and a one egg could come in from CSR, it could enhance the outcome. Do you see some change, sir, also from the government side? Because that would also be a very important piece for everybody to understand.
Yeah, two or three kinds of changes. One, many corporates and NGOs now try to fit in a lot of their initiatives with government programs. And very often, when you go to the ground, you realize that the DM or the BDO or the Tehsildar or whoever is in charge of development understands that in that area, what are the genuine development needs? And when we do baseline surveys, they also help us. They also tell us that in my block or in my district, these are the principal deficiencies that I face. And in this particular government scheme or that particular government scheme, if I had this much of money, you would be able to gain a great deal of traction by working with me. Your money would have a multiplier effect because through my government machinery and through your corporate machinery, we can work together in partnership. Another point which he mentioned as partnerships so vital. One type of partnership is the private public partnership, where the private entity cooperates with government. Example, I give you the one about the egg, but I'll give you another one. Let's say in the PMRY scheme. Now, in the Rozgar Yojana, you're offering 20 days. So, labor comes, and then there is a pond of water. So, the labor digs, makes the pond a little larger, empties out the water, makes a fresh water input, and the digging goes up to, let us say, about 6 feet or 8 feet, whatever they can dig. And then that group of labor moves on. Now, here the DM tells the corporate, you know, if this tank was actually 12 feet deep, and you had bundled the tank with concrete and made steps separately for animals and separately for human beings, then the water retention would be very high and the village would be hugely benefited. And the corporate says, great, you've done 6 feet, I'll do 6 feet more. That is my contribution to embellish what you have already done. But the outcome of that partnership would be that the village gets a much better asset than anything. So when you sort of add on to what government already is doing, it's a huge benefit. The only thing I've repeated always is never ever give money to government.
Yeah.
Never put a single paisa in सरकारी कॉफर. अपने पैसे का हिसाब खुद रखो, अपने पैसे खुद खर्च करो और जायजा लो कि मेरे पैसों का क्या हुआ. सरकारी फंड में एक पैसा भूल से भी न देना. सरकारी खाता अपनी जगह, मेरा खाता मेरी जगह. Remember this principle always.
Sir, one more very key point that is now coming out in the 10th year. I was reading the latest newsletter from the MCA, which talks about the uneven spread of the CSR spending that has unfortunately evolved. And when you say, and in fact, that is the core intent of the law, that the CSR committee of the board and the owners and all the trustees of the shareholder wealth are the ones who should decide where the money should go. Somewhere over the years, it has tended to have a little distorted spending for whatever reason. And now government is coming out with their inputs to say that can this be looked into a better way. So do you see, sir, in the next year or the coming years or the next 10 years, because now that this triangle of corporates and NGOs and the government have begun to synergize and collaborate, can this synergy now not extrapolated to be in such a way that the spread of the spending can be more even and more need-based, remote areas which are crying needs, and also focusing on impact? Well, they are talking about impact, but this geographical spread remains a bit of a challenge, sir. And I feel that is there a way by which you see that this good the reduction of trust deficit and the collaboration from the government side could lead to a better spread of the spending going forward? What is your sense, sir?
Yeah, very good point. And the last part of our conversation, this fireside chat, we'll devote to what can come in the immediate future. One of those real concerns is this.
Yeah.
So let's give you some figures. The last figures we have from the MCA are for the financial year 21-22,
Yeah.
right? What is the total side? Now, don't give me the answer. Let me ask the crowd. सालाना गत वर्ष में सारे जो कॉर्पोरेट हैं उन्होंने मिलकर सीएसआर में कितने पैसे खर्च किए? कोई अंदाजा दे सकता है? किसने बोला?
Asim, sir. He's one of our students.
No, I don't want a student from him.
But he's
Generally
he's a corporate guy now, sir.
कितनी अच्छा ठीक है, आपने ठीक जवाब दिया. जब हमने 2014 में इस एक्ट को लागू किया 1 अप्रैल से, तब अनुमानिक स्पेंडिंग कितना था? स्टूडेंट हो ना, बताओ. क्यों नहीं पता? जब स्टूडेंट हो तो आज और पूर्व दोनों पता होगा तो ही ना आप कंपेयर करोगे. 14,000 करोड़. उस वक्त कितनी कंपनियों ने करा सीएसआर? बताओ मेरे स्टूडेंट. 12,000 कंपनियों ने खर्च किया. आज के दिन अब बताओ मेरे को, आप तो स्टूडेंट हो, कितनी कंपनियों ने 26,000 करोड़ का स्पेंडिंग करा? अब देखो, स्टूडेंट हो ना, तो मैं आपसे पूछूंगा. यही प्रॉब्लम होता है, जब स्टूडेंट अपने मास्टर के साथ आ जाता है ना, तो दिक्कत होती है. आज के दिन 18,000 से ज्यादा कंपनियां ये 25,000 को स्पेंड कर रहे हैं. तो देखिए, परिवर्तन जिसे कहते हैं कि कहां से CSR और आज के दिन में कहां पहुंचा हुआ है। तो मैं आपसे जिक्र ये करूंगा कि CSR जब हमने शुरू किया था, हमने कभी नहीं सोचा कि CSR एक इंडस्ट्री बन गई है, और दो, हमारे इकोनॉमी, हमारी अर्थनीति का एक स्तंभ बन गया है। वन सेक्टर ऑफ द इकोनॉमी इज CSR। तो कहां से कहां 10 वर्ष मात्र, एक दशक के अंदर CSR का जो नया रूप है वो क्या बनकर आया हमारे सामने। आपने कहा रीजनल डिस्पैरिटी। स्टूडेंट साहब, ये बताएं कि कौन सा स्टेट इंडिया में है जिसमें ये 25,000 करोड़ का सबसे ज्यादा अंश खर्च किया हुआ है? स्टूडेंट को बताएं। किसने महाराष्ट्र बोला? नहीं, आप ना बोले। ऑडियंस में जाने दीजिए सवाल। क्यों महाराष्ट्र? कोई बोलेगा? महाराष्ट्र क्योंकि absolutely most of corporate India is in Maharashtra, and therefore the maximum spending in one single state is in Maharashtra. कितना? 50,000 करोड़ में से महाराष्ट्र में कितने पैसे खर्च हुए? तकरीबन 3,900 करोड़। एकमात्र राज्य में तकरीबन 13% की स्पेंडिंग एक राज्य में हुआ है। अच्छा स्टूडेंट बताइए, महाराष्ट्र को तो छोड़ दीजिए, नंबर 2 पे कौन है? गुड शॉट। 3 पे कौन है? एक्सलेंट। सो these are the most advanced states of India. Maximum has been spent in them. All the 8 sisters of the Northeast, 8 बहनों ने कितना सम अट्रैक्ट किया? कितना परसेंटेज का एक्सपेंडिचर इन 8 बहनों को मिला? कोई बता सकता है? आप गेस कर रही हो या आपको मालूम है? बहुत अच्छा। 0.91%, मात्र 0.91% 8 सिस्टर ने मिलकर जुगाड़ किया। यही विषय में ध्यान आकर्षण कर रहे हैं निखिल पंत साहब। एंड वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड that from 10 years, what have we learned? And therefore, in the next 10 years, what should we do to make some correction?
Yeah.
And I think the last major set of corrections came in January of 21.
Yeah.
In the next round with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, when I sit, we will try to say, I would like, this is what I would tell them, not that you compel, कि आप लोग जरूरन आपके 2% में से आधा प्रतिशत एस्पिरेशनल डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स में करें, ना करें तो आपको ये दिया जाएगा सजा, ऐसा नहीं। मगर जो कॉरपोरेट्स उन 8 राज्यों में खर्च कर रहे हैं उनको इंसेंटिवाइज कीजिए। वहां पे अगर आपने ये किया तो आपको इतना टैक्स इंसेंटिव मिलेगा, अगर आपने ये किया तो आपको ये मिलेगा, लैंड रेट्स विल बी रिड्यूस्ड, whatever other things are happening, incentivize them. I am a bureaucrat who always felt that the less regulation the better. Unfortunately, you can't do without regulation. If there's no regulation, it is complete chaos. But if you can get the same job done by incentivization, so much the better. And I think from now on, the next 10 years should be about incentivization, involvement, collaboration, partnership. These are the buzzwords of the next 10 years.
Sir, I wanted to ask you one thing from the NGO perspective, because I travel a lot around the country, and as I conduct my courses and my conversations and seminars, my first question is that in an audience, how many know Section 135, 9 clauses? I see 2 or 3 hands getting raised in the 10th year of CSR. And then I ask all of them, how many of you want funding? And then I also tell them in a joke that if it is very desperate, you can stand and raise both hands also. So then it is like a sea change. So, what would you like to say to the NGOs, sir? I think there may be many NGOs here, because this is a strange kind of a phenomena or whatever, because a kind of an ostrich approach sometimes I feel, because they know that there is a mandate, and they also know that just being partners in implementation is not enough. They have to be partners in compliance, as you rightly said. They have to be partners in compliance also now. So, what kind of a guru mantra can you give them, sir? Because we have, I guess, almost ending the session. Are there many NGOs here? Do we have NGOs, or we have more corporates? Because that is something which is my personal first-hand information. I travel a lot, and I see this as a crying problem. And they keep saying, "हमें fundraising सिखा दीजिए, आप हमें fundraising सिखा दीजिए." So what is it? And in fact, the Northeast also I am finding, where some corporates are interested to go, they are feeling a little shaky, because the NGOs over there are not aware of the compliance. So इसमें सर आप क्या
Yeah,
कह सकते हो?
so first of all, as corporates have learned so much about NGOs, now they're very picky and very choosy. आप इनका माइंडसेट समझने की कोशिश करें. कॉर्पोरेट हमसे क्या चाहता है? वो अपने पैसे यूं नहीं देने वाले भाई, ऐसे नहीं देने वाले. और क्यों दें? पहले अपने आप को योग्य बनाओ. हमने ये काम किया, वो काम किया, ठीक है, वो सब कहानियां हम सुन चुके हैं. आपके इंटरनल स्ट्रेंथ क्या है? What is your manpower? What is your resources? What is your capacity? हम जो आपसे मांगेंगे, क्या आप दे पाओगे? कितने आपके पास फाइनेंशियल एक्सपर्ट्स बैठे हैं? प्रपोजल लिखने कितनों को आता है? पावर पॉइंट प्रेजेंटेशन जल्द से जल्द बढ़िया कौन बना सकता है? जब मैं आप लोगों को बनाऊंगा, बुलाऊंगा और कहूंगा मेरी टीम के आगे प्रस्तुत करो अपना बिजनेस प्लान, कितनों में हिम्मत होगी कि वहां जाके कॉर्पोरेट के एटमॉस्फेयर में बड़ी बड़ी बिल्डिंग, इतनी सारी गाड़ियां, वहां जाके सीधे सीधे एक पावर पॉइंट प्रेजेंटेशन करना सबके हिम्मत में है? नहीं है. लेकिन जब तक अपने आप को वहां तक आप नहीं पहुंच पाओगे, तब तक आप अट्रैक्ट कैसे करोगे? अब निखिल पंत साहब को देखिए, इनको कोई एजुकेशन की जरूरत है? इनको कोई जानकारी की जरूरत है? निपुण है. जहां जाएंगे इतना बढ़िया पिच डालेंगे, कॉर्पोरेट पूछेगा भाई आप कहां से आ गए? तो उस मॉडल पे अपने आप को आगे बढ़ाइए. और जब आप पिच करोगे, पिच एक शब्द कभी ना भूले, ये क्रिकेट का पिच नहीं है. कॉर्पोरेट के आगे जब आप पिच करोगे तो पिच कैसे करना होता है? फंड रेजिंग मीन्स पिचिंग. ये तकनीक आप जरूर सीखें, और किसी से नहीं तो पंत साहब से ले लें 2-4 सेशन. ठीक, अगर आपका पिच नहीं होगा तो आप कहीं तक नहीं पहुंचेंगे. यही मेरा आपको उपदेश.
सर के सामने कुछ भी बोलने में डर भी लगता है मुझे थोड़ा. सर तो ही इज द मास्टर गुरु. बट थैंक यू सो मच सर. पर अभी हमारा टाइम सर इज ऑलमोस्ट अप, बट वी कैन टेक सम क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम द ऑडियंस, बिकॉज दैट विल बी वेरी वेरी यूजफुल. आप अगर, ये बहुत अच्छा मौका है क्वेश्चन पूछने का सर से, और मेरी रिक्वेस्ट होगी टू पीपल हु आर हियर दैट आस्क सम वेरी वेरी फंडामेंटल काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस, जो कि आपको लगता है कि आपकी एरिया में गैप है, या आपको लग रहा है कि इस एरिया में काम करना चाहिए. So sir is the best person and the right person to ask that question. So maybe, do we have anybody raising their hand? Anyone? Yes, yes, ma'am, over there. Mike, agar yes, 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 surely. One by one, if you can do. And your name and your organization, if you can tell us, please.
Okay. Hello.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Sonia, and I represent Sahas, which works in solid waste management. It's an NGO. So it is not that the regulation prevents this, but what we have now seen, what we are facing is that because of the regulation, that whatever money is given has to be spent by March. That's what the law says. So what is now happening is that many of our donors, even if they have the intentions to support the program for multi-years, they're very particular that it needs to be spent in that particular year, and the renew does not happen on time. And when it doesn't happen on time, we cannot have funds to continue the operations for maybe 4 months, 5 months, or even 6 months.
Okay.
So this is a
So
ground
where do you
thing.
find the answer to this question?
So it is again like, the renewal should happen.
No. The question has been answered in black and white. Where can you read it? In black and white. Where can you read it?
So it's, if you're talking about that, we can have
January 2021, amendments to the rules by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. What does it tell you? What to do with unspent funds?
It tells me to return the fund and then the donor returns it back.
No. You can keep unspent funds in an escrow account and then
Spend it over 3 years.
over the next 3 years. कोई जल्दबाजी नहीं आज के दिन.
नहीं सर,
आराम से पैसे लें और प्रेम से खर्च करें ताकि उसका जो इम्पैक्ट हो वो बढ़िया इम्पैक्ट हो. सबको दिखाएं कि हमारा एनजीओ ने कितना बढ़िया काम किया, तब ना मजा आएगा. इसलिए रूल हमने बदले हैं, आपको स्पेंडिंग के लिए फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी मिली है. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन प्लीज. यस मैम, यू आर आस्किंग हियर.
Yes, ma'am. What sir is saying about the ongoing projects, okay, ma'am? We'll explain it to you later. I think let's go to the next one.
No, you can also convert one into an ongoing one.
Into an ongoing project.
It's not that you have to finish. हाँ, बताओ.
Yeah, I'm Sonia Sharma
I'll get
Sure,
back
from
to you.
Concern India Foundation. So, although in the previous sessions we could debate on this, the CSR and the ESG, but I wanted to ask you, because you are very much like, you are a creator. The CSR, you drafted it and you're there. So, how do you see ESG taking over CSR? Because still there's a question in my mind.
Let's get this clear. ESG will never take over CSR.
Yeah.
And CSR will never take over ESG. अच्छा, ESG का मुझे बताएं 3 शब्द. E क्या है, S क्या है, G क्या है, बताइए.
Environment, social governance.
Okay. Environment is about environmental sustainability. What is social?
Social is the social responsibility, even the
है क्या?
society. I mean, a contribution towards the society is also.
वो तो
there.
एक पार्ट है, और
See, I
बहुत
think
सारी
sustainability,
चीजें.
बहुत
उसमें
सारी
ह्यूमन
चीजें
राइट्स है,
human rights भी.
उसमें वर्क प्लेस एथिक्स हैं, वर्क फोर्स एथिक्स हैं, बहुत सारी चीजें सोशल में. और जी में क्या है?
Governance.
किस चीज का गवर्नेंस?
So it's the regulation, compliances, the board.
कॉर्पोरेट गवर्नेंस,
Corporate.
है ना. कोई भी व्यक्ति अगर खड़ा हो जाए और कहे मैं ईएसजी का एक्सपर्ट हूं, आप क्या करोगे उस बंदे का? जोर से थप्पड़ लगाओगे. क्यों? क्योंकि कोई बंदा आज तक पैदा ही नहीं हुआ है जो तीनों विषयों में विशेषज्ञ हो. और सबसे पहले तो मैं हाथ उठाऊंगा कि मैं नहीं हूं. हाँ, कॉर्पोरेट गवर्नेंस में बड़ी लिखाई पढ़ाई मैंने करी, सीएसआर का गॉडफादर मैं हूं, बट एनवायरमेंटल सस्टेनेबिलिटी बहुत ही कॉम्प्लेक्स, बहुत ही मुश्किल काम है, और सेक्टर्स भी अलग हैं. स्टील सेक्टर में मैंने 10 साल काम किया, लेकिन ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशन स्टील सेक्टर की पूरी जो है पकड़ मुझे भी नहीं है. इसलिए ईएसजी का एक्सपर्ट कभी नहीं बनेगा. आप ESG का कंप्लायंस एक्सपर्ट बन सकते हो. आप मुझसे कहो चटर्जी साहब मेरे कंपनी के लिए BRSR का रिपोर्ट बना दीजिए, आंखें बंद करके मैं BRSR का रिपोर्ट बना दूंगा. क्यों? क्योंकि BRSR मैंने खुद अपने हाथों से लिखा है. But the point here is, these are now two pretty much separate verticals, but combined in the same vertical in most organizations. CSR and ESG are there in the same vertical because they belong to the same responsible business responsibility area. So one is not to replace the other. The other point important is, one is mandatory, the other is not. The other one, which is ESG, is investor driven today, largely. No country has made it mandatory. You do not do, therefore, you will suffer financially. But in CSR, it is mandatory in our country. So I would request you always to understand that one will never take over the other. But CSR is a part of ESG. Yet it has very different kind of reporting and mandatory requirements. So treat them separately, all right?
Any more questions from this side? Or maybe we can then end it because we're already running out of
Yes, I
time.
think we've overrun our
already
time
overrun our
before
time.
the organizers throw us off the stage. Thank you for giving
Thank you
us a
so
very
much, sir.
patient
And
listening.
I big round of applause for Dr. Chatterjee. What I still remember is 10 years ago when I was also part of his team, like a few of us very fortunate people, sir का बहुत सरल तरीका है explain करने का. And if you're able to understand the concepts, I would say that doing such conversations with him can help one to simplify your work. And if you simplify it, then you become better in compliance also, I have seen. Compliance is not complicated. It is not rocket science. But you need to simplify it, to structure it, and then make it a part of habit. So often what I say to people is this, that I'm a sports guy also. So if Sachin Tendulkar, or let us say any fast bowler, ग्लेन मैग्रा और एनीबडी, जब वो बॉलिंग करने आएगा तो वो हर समय ये नहीं सोचेगा कि मेरा नो बॉल होगा कि नहीं होगा. अगर वो ये सोचेगा तो वो बॉल नहीं कर पाएगा. So if the focus is on compliance, then you will forget about the impact. So हमारी compliance की जो elements है वो इतने habit का part होना चाहिए कि हम impact पे focus कर सके. I think that is a very key thing, sir. And the other very important thing जो sir ने बोली है वो going forward के लिए, I think I'm very hopeful. I can say for sure because I work very closely with governments, with corporates and NGOs. और कमिंग ईयर्स में मुझे लगता है कि वो जो सर जोग्राफिकल स्प्रेड की भी बात कह रहे हैं, ऑलरेडी मिनिस्ट्री रिकमेंडेशंस भी दे रही है और कॉर्पोरेट्स भी आ रहे हैं. एनजीओस को मुझे लगता है कि थोड़ी और मेहनत करने की जरूरत है इन टर्म्स ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि वो केवल इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में उनको फंड रेजिंग नहीं कर पाएंगे. आपको कंप्लायंस पे भी ध्यान देना पड़ेगा और उसको अगर आप हैबिट में ले आए, आचरण में ले आए, तो फिर काम थोड़ा सरल हो जाता है. Is that the right way to put it, sir? So thank you so much to the organizers and thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhaskar Chatterjee ji and Nikhil Pant ji, for such a knowledgeable session. It really enlightened us a lot. And now it's time for the award distribution ceremony. So I request Raju Sharma ji to please come on the stage. And I request Dr. Bhaskar Chatterjee ji and Nikhil Pant ji to please stay on the stage. Excellence in rural development and infrastructure. The project was NT Vidu. They constructed 105 houses so far, positively impacted life of 1,000 families across Kerala by providing housing accommodation. Keep clapping, everyone.
drinking water for the project
And the next award goes to ICIC Lombard General Insurance Company Limited for the CSR Excellence in Safe Drinking Water Project Niranjali. Benefited 18.3 million students with clean water, expanded reach to 87.7 million students, installed water purifier in school and ensured their functionality through a 3-year maintenance contract. Can we have a huge round of applause, everyone? Congratulations. Now, next award goes to SM Sehgal Foundation in CSR Excellence in Rural Development. The project was Krishi Jyoti, and the project highlights are: Project Krishi have impacted life of 164 across 183 villages in the state of Haryana, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka and Maharashtra. 1,64,017 people across 183 villages